welcome to the Beware the Moon podcast. My name is Hannah. I almost dropped my microphone. Holy crap. Today we are going to be talking about a book instead of a movie. Very exciting. This is one that I've gotten a lot of requests of since I did. This is a sequel, and I did the first book in the series, and I don't necessarily think it can be called a series. At this point, it's just a duology. But I will be talking about Along the River of Flesh by Kristopher Triana? Not entirely certain. I go with Triana just because it rolls better for me. Probably because I'm Southern. But anyway, so for those of you who haven't, you're like, what is Gone to See the Riverman? Check that out. I'll have the link to that review below. But this is the sequel to that book. So it's centralized around Edmund Cox, who is a serial killer. He is at the end of the last book, he had escaped from prison. And so we're kind of picking up where that left off. So what he's up to and all that good stuff. I would say for trigger warnings, this book is kind of like in the same vein of the first one, where it's like there are kids getting hurt in both physical and sexual ways. So like if that's gonna upset you, and luckily like he doesn't talk about it like in such a vile way typically. The one character who's really into like touching kids, basically, he will go into some detail but not a ton, and it's just to show how callous he is and basically how much of a piece of shit he is. So it's not like he's like detailing these incidences, it's him in his head remembering these incidences and like, you know, kind of describing them a little bit, like not a ton, again. But if any of that kind of stuff like really is like ooh, then maybe skip this one. The other thing that I will say is that, I mean, obviously it's about a serial killer, and this serial killer is also a rapist. He does really gross things with the bodies, so if that would freak you out, maybe this isn't for you. As for the like writing style, I love Kristopher Triana's writing style. He's very poetic when he says things, but it's also very like, it's easy to characterize, like he characterizes things so quickly and succinctly. I know his books don't meet like the word count typically for like an agent to go to bat for this book or his books in general. They like none of them meet that word count requirement, but they're so good. Like it's crazy to me because he just doesn't need them. He doesn't need as many words as Stephen King uses, and like honestly, thank God. I hate when authors take forever to describe something that I'm like, I don't give a fuck about that thing. Also, like, it's very, like, physical and literal, whereas Triana is very, like, metaphorical and poetical, and so it's really easy to get drawn into his writing. And then, at the same time, so, like, his books, the three that I've read, they kind of jump from, like, different characters' perspective to other characters' perspectives, and so it's not just you're with one character, and so I think the benefit of that is that it kind of creates more mystery and it creates more interests if you like the characters he's talking about, and maybe you don't like the character necessarily, but you're interested in their actions. And so jumping from character to character like this, I just think it creates a more interesting book. It's a little bit more chaotic, but he does it so well that like it's not, it could be, I should say it could be more chaotic, but it's not. He does it so well. So that's kind of like it for the spoiler-free stuff. If you're like, oh, okay, I've never heard of this, maybe I should go read it, I would say either start with my podcast on Gone to See the Riverman, or just go read Gone to See the Riverman. And these books, like I said, they don't meet the word count requirement for an agent to pick up these books. I think Triana does his own publishing. So he's like self-published and all that. So, they're short books is kind of the point of what I'm saying. So they're super easy to read, very easy to digest. Like I tore through both Gone to See the Riverman and Along the River of Flesh super fast. And same with Prettiest Girl in the Grave, which is the other book I've read by him. And I will be doing a review on that as well sometime in the near future. It's been a while since I've read it, so I have to reread it. And then, which I could have done, I was on an airplane. So, like, I read through this one, and honestly, I was like, thank God the guy next to me is, like, head down trying to sleep. Because it was just, I would read certain lines and I'm like, I really don't want him to look over and see this. And then he was sleeping, so I was like, thank God the person next to me is sleeping and not like a older child or something. That would have been horrible. Like, I would not have been able to read it if that were the case. But anyway, so if you haven't, go read this one, then come back to the review. So this book, I don't necessarily think there's like tons of themes in this book. It's really just a really good fucked up story. And it really is like deeply fucked up. Like I said, if someone had been sitting next to me and like paying attention to what I was reading, like glancing over my shoulder, I could not have read this book. I just wouldn't have been able to do it, like, morally. I would have felt like I was traumatizing them, which this book to me was not traumatizing. But I've been doing horror stuff for a long time. I've seen some actually traumatizing things in my life and experienced traumatizing things. So, like, this wasn't too bad. So, basically, the book has the main characters. There's 4 of them. First, you have Edmund Cox, the serial killer. He is going back to his hometown of Killen, which is spelled Killen, which is really funny. And it is a real place. But he's going back to Killen he's going to go see the Riverman. And if you're like, who the fuck is that? We'll explain that more as we go. Then you have June, who is a young girl of kind of like, she's a native to Killen, we know right away. She ran away from Killen and is now coming back because she's on the hunt for Edmund Cox. And then we have Keith, who, excuse me, I had to burp. He is a detective, and him and his partner were the detectives who caught Edmund Cox. And they interviewed him, they spent extensive time with him, and so Keith is on leave for shooting a guy on the job. So he decides he's going to go look for Edmund Cox on his own, and he correctly guesses that Edmund Cox is going back to his hometown. Then we have Gary, who is an older PI, and not like older as in like he's in his 60s, he's like in his 40s or 50s maybe. And Gary, like I said, he's a private investigator. He usually does like insurance fraud cases and then like obviously stakeouts for cheating, because like that is typically what you get if you're a PI. But he's taken on this missing persons case, and he believes the daughter of the family he's looking for, her name is Jessica, he believes she was killed by Edmund Cox. She came to Killen in order to research folklore, specifically the Riverman, because her main thing, research topics and stuff, she's aiming to be a scholar, is folklore. And so she was looking at this local legend of the Riverman, and that's why she came to Killen. And Gary thinks like she accidentally ran into Edmund and it just didn't end well for her. So that's why he's here, and he's not necessarily on the hunt for Edmund, he's on the hunt for this girl Jessica. No, Jessica, she can't swim. Anyway, so I just had to get that out of my system. So we kind of jump from perspective to perspective. Keith, we get this inner monologue of his, and we just get the sense that he thinks he's hot shit. He wants to be hot shit. He's very proud of himself. He is very ambiguous, and he's kind of willing to do whatever it takes to get what he wants, is kind of the feeling we get from him right off the bat. Then Gary is depressed. He is like just a sad little fella. And we learn later on it's because he was depressed kind of his whole life, but then he met his wife, and he like really enjoyed life after that, and he was very grateful to her for loving him, and he was just so excited to be starting his own family. And while she was pregnant, she was a school teacher, and a school shooting happened, and unfortunately her life was taken, as was the baby's. And so since then Gary has not been the same, and he kind of just survives and gets by. He doesn't really like, he doesn't really enjoy life. And I will be posting this on YouTube, so unfortunately I'm gonna have to say, like, he considers unaliving himself. Like, he talks about how he is kind of toyed with the idea of uninstalling himself from life, but he's never gone through with it. And so that's kind of like where Gary is at. June, she is very she's very much like, I wanted to get out of Killen because I wanted to get away from this shithole town. I wanted to do something better with my life. I wanted to prove that I can be something, and I wanted to just get away from Killen and her grandparents who raised her. And so she just kind of wanted to be better is the first kind of glimpse at her we get, which kind of changes as things go. So these 4 people are in this town, all independent of each other, all looking for kind of the same thing or things like in the periphery of that thing. And so their worlds end up colliding at some point. We have Gary is asking around town for Jessica. Keith gets hold that that's what Gary's doing. And Keith, we have a scene towards the beginning of the book where he's talking to a psychologist who is issued by his work. He has to do this because he was put on leave. And the story he tells the psychologist is he's like, yeah, so, I was going to check out the sex trafficker who traffics kids. I get to his house and he's got this little girl in his arm and he's got a gun to her head, and I tried talking him down and he just wouldn't listen, and he ended up shooting the little girl, so I shot him and there was nothing I could do. And we see, like, through the book that he feels some kind of guilt for this, but tries not to. Like, he really is trying to dig himself out of this guilt. Like, he was like, there's nothing I could have done, is his rhetoric we get from the beginning. And the other thing about Kristopher Triana's work is he has some really cool things that you suspect at the beginning, and then, like, they end up, like, you're like, no, that can't be. And then it ends up being the thing, and you're like, oh no. And the reveal is so good. And it's not necessarily a plot twist, because he really gives, like, a ton of hints that, like, this is the case from the beginning. And so with June has her own plot twist that I totally guessed. Like, probably the second time we heard something from June's perspective. And then Keith, I only guessed his probably, like, a couple chapters before it was revealed. And I was like, ooh. So it's not, like, obvious. Because, like I said, you're like, there's no way. No, come on. Like, but yeah. Anyway, so Gary's asking around Killen for Edmund Cox, and, like, also this legend of the Riverman, because Jessica's last paper she was working on was specifically about the Riverman, and she lives a couple hours away. And so her parents were like, sometimes she would take off for a weekend to go research something nearby. And so Gary is like, I think this is what she was doing. She has unfinished research on this. Like, this is her paper, and, like, she probably came here asking about this. So he starts asking about it, and the locals are like, don't pick at that thread. Don't do it. And some of them are nicer about it, and some of them are more aggressive about it, but they're like, don't pick at that thread. Don't do it. And so Keith comes into town shortly after Gary's been asking around. And they're like, are you with that other fella? And he's like, what other fella? And she's like, he's a PI or something. So Keith, of course, pays Gary a visit. And he's like, let's work together on this. Like, you're looking for Jessica, I'm looking for Edmund. We're both hearing this stuff about the Riverman. Let's compare notes. I'll share what I know, you share what you know. And what Keith knows about Edmund is just his habits, basically. He doesn't actually know. Like, he was like, so technically the Cox family owns some kind of shack on this river, and it's called the Hollow River. He's like, they own a shack on the Hollow River somewhere, but this is such, like, backwater, old school territory that, like, nobody has deeds in this area. There's all these shacks that, like, have just been run through these families for generations, and a lot of these families out in this area along the river keep to themselves, and they're kind of inbred too, so, like, there's really no, like, way of knowing where this shack is. And he's like, every time we looked for it, we couldn't find it. And he was like, some of the guys, so that he drives out there with Gary, because Gary's like, if Jessica's anywhere, it's probably at a shack. So they drive out to this area. They have to walk along the riverbank and stuff through the woods. And Keith shares with him, like, there are some guys who thought this thing was haunted. Like, there was some supernatural element because they would get turned around in these woods and it freaked them out. And so Gary is like, I mean, that's kind of believable. As they're going through, at the same time, June had already gone out to the forest to look for Cox's shack. And unlike these two, she finds the shack. And in the shack is, she walks into the shack, and, like, we know from the previous book that there is a dead body in the basement, and that it does fit Jessica's description, so it's probably Jessica. Then Edmund, also in his chapters, he goes back home, he goes to his cabin, he goes and he pulls Jessica's teeth out of her head, and he knows her name, he knows it's Jessica, so, like, very clearly we know that's what happened. So she goes in, she doesn't make it to the basement, though, because as she's in there, the place basically, like, she sees this, she has, like, kind of an acid trip. It, like, blossoms with blood, there's blood everywhere, she's hearing all these screaming, she's freaking out, she runs out of the cabin, and she's like, that was freaky, and she keeps going. Right before this happened, or around the same time, basically, in the timeline of the story, we have Keith and Gary come across a dead couple, and clearly Edmund has been here, because the guy has just kind of been stabbed to death, he's kind of been gutted, and we do know from Edmund's chapter, like, we get this moment from the boyfriend who's been gutted, his perspective, and then also Edmund's perspective. And so he gutted this guy, and then he made one of his girlfriend one of his victims, and it's, like, a very different process when he makes a woman one of his victims than just, like, he murdered them, because he tortures them and does sexual things with the body. And so, like, Gary and Keith walk up on it, and Gary's vomiting. He's like, this is the worst thing I've ever seen. And Keith is like, no, it gets even worse. Like, yeah, he's like, if we tested that girl's eye socket for human, like, fluids, you would probably find Edmund Cox's semen in it. And he was like, ugh! And I was like, also like, ugh! But as they're, like, talking to each other about it, Keith's like, so he's obviously been here, we need to keep going and find him. And Gary's like, hell no, I didn't sign up for that, like, I'm just trying to find a probably dead girl. And he's like, listen, if you don't come with me and I need backup, he's gonna do this to someone else. And Gary is like, well, we need to go back to town and, like, call for backup, basically. And Keith's like, we don't have time for that. He's gonna do this to someone else if he comes across someone else. And so he kind of uses this, like, very true but also very manipulative argument to get Gary to agree. And Gary really does not want to go. Like, he's like, yes, I have a pistol strapped to my ankle, but, like, I've never had to use it, and I don't ever want to use it. And this crime scene was, like, enough to make Gary vomit, so he's like, I'm not cut out for this, I don't want to do this. But because he is a good guy, he's like, okay, for the sake of other women who might be in the area, I will help you try and find Edmund. So they go carrying on, and I just want to, sorry, it's like 20 minutes in basically, but I'm not going to give every detail because I still want you to go read the book because it is worth it and it is really good. But just know I am leaving some things out, so there's more to discover if you read the book. I'm basically just going along the general plot. So anyway, Gary and Keith, like, I'm kind of leaving out all of Edmund's chapters at this point, so you definitely want to go read those if you're like, you want to know what a fucked up serial killer would be thinking at this point. So, and clearly Triana has done, like, a lot of research on serial killers and habits and mindsets, and so, like, yeah, you definitely want to go read those. So June is out walking in these woods, and things we start to get to know about June is that she was raised by her grandparents, and that her mom is in an insane asylum, and her mom's face is, like, basically destroyed. Like, she as a child was scared of her mom because her mom didn't speak and her face was destroyed. And June, like, her grandparents kind of lied to her. They said her dad, like, was just absent, like, he just left, or he was, like, dead or something. And she was like, that's kind of weird. But obviously that's not the whole story. So she figures out that she's a rape baby, because that's how her mom ended up in the insane asylum, is that she was beaten and tortured and raped, and then she came along. And so she kind of like does the math of like the timeline to figure that out. She never brings it up to her grandparents, because she's like, my grandparents must resent me to a certain extent, because they only had the one daughter, and that daughter's life was destroyed, and the result of that life being destroyed is me. And so she really internalizes that and turns to like drugs and sex and all the things you would turn to if you're the average teenager whose life is in shambles. That's what they turn to, and they feel unloved and all that. So her grandparents raised her. She would go visit her mom. My apologies, had to stop. The dogs were barking because my cat came in the room and they hate him, and to be fair, he started it. He hates them too. Anyway, so basically we know she visits her mom. She doesn't like visiting her mom because her mom terrifies her. Her grandparents raised her, and they live in Killen, so like they're not rich. This is like a very backwater town. And she left early because of all of her drugs and sex, and, you know, she just wanted to go live her own life. So as she's walking through these woods trying to look for Edmund, because she's sure, like, obviously this is where I started to suspect, like, oh, she thinks Edmund Cox is her dad. She thinks he's the one who destroyed and raped her mom. And, like, yes, that ends up being the case. So that's why she's trying to find Edmund. I thought it was pretty obvious from the onset. I'm sure some people don't get that from this point in the book. They probably guess it later on, if they guess it at all. For me, I just thought like it was really, really obvious. The bigger plot twist comes with Keith, so just keep that in mind. So anyway, she's like trying to find Edmund because she thinks that's her dad. And Gary and Keith run across her, and Keith is already like immediately having like very sexual thoughts about her, which I'm like, ooh, gross, sleazebag cop, because he used to be a cop on a beat and then he got promoted to detective. And so you're like, ooh, that's not the kind of officer you want to be around. You want, protecting quote unquote your community. But, I'm not in charge. Anyway, so Keith is, like, immediately having sexual thoughts about her. Him and Gary, especially Gary, is like, you have to come with us. Like, they're both trying to convince her to just leave the forest. They're like, there's a dangerous man around, blah, blah, blah. And Jude's like, no, I have to go through this way. I'm not leaving. I'm not scared. And so they're both like, So they're all kind of going the same way anyway. So Gary decides to stick it out for June. Because he's like, he has like this very like, he lost his wife, lost his kid, and that's like really like, this is when it starts really like pulling at him. And so he feels very like protectively like of her, because he feels like he failed to protect his wife and his kid. So he's like, I'm gonna protect her. And so he's a little bit projecting. Keith searches her bag and finds all this Edmund Cox stuff, so he thinks she's just a serial killer groupie, and it pisses him off because he's like, I have to pay for sex, like, I have to hire prostitutes to satisfy me, but Edmund Cox has women literally coming out into the middle of nowhere to find him. Like, this is bullshit. And so they, at this point, too, they already know for sure that Lori, and I think the other groupie of Edmund's was named Nikki, I can't remember, but both of them are dead. Like, Keith already found that out. His partner told him, showed him that, like, gave him the lowdown on it, so he's like, that doesn't surprise me. What surprises me is that women throw themselves at him, and they know he's a fucking murderous psychotic, and it's not just like he murders them, he tortures them alive. Like, he talks about, like, Edmund's chapters, he pulls out, like, Lori's eyeball, he keeps it with him, and he writes, like, little letters to her. I don't know if it's, like, literal or just in his head, but he writes, like, little letters to her still, because that's kind of how they got to know each other, it was exchanging letters. So he keeps her eyeball with him, and he says something at some point about how he popped it out and then, like, licked the inside of the socket. So, like, he tortures them to death and, like, is sexual with them while he's doing that. It's insane. Like, Edmund Cox is like level 15 serial killer. Like, he makes Ted Bundy look easy. It's crazy. So, anyway, like, yeah. So, Keith is, like, June's existence and her presence and her drive to find Edmund piss him off consistently. And it gets worse because something about the Hollow River that, like, is explained more from both, like, June and Edmund's point of view because they know more of the folklore around it is that, like, it tends to draw out your darker tendencies and your darker memories because it's the Riverman's domain. And so Edmund is looking specifically for the Riverman, and it turns out because he thinks he deserves the right to be the new Riverman. The Riverman tells him when he finds him, like, you're not done yet because there are souls in my domain and on this river who are looking for you, so you got to tie up loose ends. And so obviously he's talking about, like, Gary and Keith and June, which they haven't reached his domain yet at this point. So they find a boat, and it's Buzz's boat from the first book, and they take it on the river because they're like, we have to go by boat, like we just have to, like there's so much ground and they're worried they're losing Edmund and he knows the terrain better than they do, so like they decide to go by boat. And so eventually, like, what happens on this river is when you're going down it, at some point the water turns red, and then like flesh starts coming up, and from Edmund's point of view we understand that, like, oh, it's the flesh of the people he's killed and the women he's tortured and all that stuff, and you're like, that's special. Meanwhile, Gary and Keith and June, when it happens with them, they're just freaking out about it, more so Gary than Keith or June. And we kind of learn, like, when June decided to leave, she was going to steal from her grandpa's lockbox. And she was going to do it on a Sunday while her grandma and grandpa were at church. But her grandma and grandpa were like, you got the devil in you, girl, like, you need to go to church. So she's like, I can't just skip, I have to be, like, sick. So she gets a can of vegetables and, like, cuts it open, pretends to vomit, dumps it in the toilet. Her grandma comes in and she pretends to vomit again, and the grandma's like, it's okay, just let it out. And her grandma's not, like, paying attention to if she's, like, vomiting or not, really. She's not, like, looking that deeply into it. So she gets a pass to stay home from church. So then she's like, I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna steal from the lockbox. But not just the lockbox is locked, but the cabinet is locked too. And she's like, at the time I was mad at that, like, mad at them for being so suspicious of me, even though I was, like, proving them right in the moment, which now I realize, and, like, I get it. But so she is like, whatever, I know Grandpa's gun safe is open. She grabs the shotgun, blasts the door to the cabinet open, gets the lockbox, and she wants to, like, because, like, the way her grandpa works is at the end of the week he brings home cash. He doesn't keep much money in the bank because he doesn't trust banks, which, valid, but he keeps cash on him, which is dangerous because of these reasons, like people like June. So he comes home, he'll put his cash from the end of the week in the lockbox, and then sometimes he deposits it, sometimes he doesn't. He usually keeps a ton of cash on hand, though. So that's why she's like, it won't be like 10 grand or something like that, but it'll at least be a couple $100. That'll get me out of killing. So she goes to open this lockbox and it's locked. And so she's like trying to figure out like what she can use to open the lockbox, because she's like, I don't want to just blast it with a shotgun because it could damage the cash. So as she's looking around for something to help her get the lockbox open, she notices a casserole on the counter. And her grandma sometimes makes casseroles to give to the pastor. And so, like, really, really fast, she realizes, like, holy shit, they're gonna come back. And she doesn't hear them, but they're there now, because the shotgun blast, like, fucked with her hearing. And so her grandma's like, oh my god, kind of a thing. And so the grandpa gets really mad, and he's like, you're not gonna steal from me, and blah, 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 and I can't believe you, and we should have never, ever had you. Sorry about that, I was getting a phone call. I've had, like, 15 interruptions. Anyway, so her grandpa's like, oh, hell no, you're not stealing from me, girl. And he's like, we should have never, like, blah, blah, blah. So he goes to grab the gun from her, and he's not scared of her using it on him. So she's like, I'll just pop one off to scare him. And the gun is, like, away, like, kind of next to his head. So she squeezes the trigger, and he turns, and she's like kind of floored. He turns, she had shot off half of her grandma's head. So immediately her grandpa is like, oh no, and goes over to his wife, and like her brains spill out on the floor. It's like super graphic. And he's like, you've got the devil in you. And he's like, I should have just let your mama kill you, and blah, blah, blah. And we should have never brought you here, and da, da, da. So then she's like, well, I'm already fucked. So she kills her grandpa too. And she's like, a lot of people here assume shotgun blasts and things like that are fine because a lot of people catch their own food. But she's like, at some point, someone's going to question. So her grandparents always attend church. So she's like, at some point, they're going to question. They're going to come here. They're going to find all this. I need to book it. So she grabs the lockbox. She steals her grandpa's car and then just leaves. And like later on down the road, she finds something to open the lockbox with, and there was like $40 in there. And she was like, he either hid it somewhere else in the house or he made a deposit. And she's like, I can't go back to check. Like, this is just how it's gonna have to be. I'm gonna have to survive off these $40. And so that's kind of like June's backstory. And after running away and running away and running away, Edmund Cox eventually gets caught. He's a really big prolific serial killer in this story. And so his like information is just spread everywhere, all over the news. And so she becomes fascinated with him, puts two and two together, and figures out that must be my dad. And so that's why she's on this trip. So while she's on the river, that's what she's seeing is like her dead grandparents, and they're questioning her. They're like, why did you do this to us? And so she's kind of freaking out about that. Gary sees lockers in the school, and he sees his wife being shot by this school shooter. Keith doesn't see any of that. He's like more or less thinking about what he did. And it turns out what he did is actually, he didn't just shoot a sex trafficker. He found this guy on his own independently as a detective. And he blackmailed this guy into letting him have some of the quote-unquote product that this guy has. So the girl who was shot, her name is Olive, or Olivia, one of the two. But the girl who was shot in the incident was his main, I don't know how to call it, like, his main prey, I guess. And so she was like 8, and he had like basically blackmailed this guy into first letting him take her virginity and then just constantly raping her. So he finds out that this guy is going to get busted. So what Keith actually did, it's completely different from the beginning story. And like, this is why he's saying like, I did what I had to do, and like nothing I could have done could have saved her, because he was in his own sick way emotionally attached to this little girl that he was constantly raping. And I think mostly because he liked the power trip and all of that. Like, it's very obvious, like, he likes the power of being a police officer. Like, he talks about how he used to blackmail girls he would pull over into, sexual favors. And so this is kind of like the slippery slope he started on to get to this little girl. And so he didn't want to kill her. He wished he could have taken her, but like there was too much risk involved. And so he shows up to this guy's house, and he is like, where's the girl? And so he's like, she's in this room. He verifies she's in there. Then he's like, where's your gun? The sex trafficker shows him where his gun is. He takes the sex trafficker's gun. He has him stand in front of the doorway, and he acts like he's gonna leave, but he turns and he shoots the trafficker in the head. Then he goes and he gets the little girl, and he has her stand next to the guy and shoots her with his gun. So that way his story would kind of match up. And so that's like what actually went down. And this whole time he's really pissed. He's very sexually frustrated because he likes the pain of inflicting sex upon these girls. He likes the pain of like rape causes them. And so he's just like, at this point, like along the Hollow River, you realize, oh, he's a piece of shit. Like before I thought he was just kind of a dick, but he's like genuinely a piece of shit. Like, wow, he really deserves to die. So they're going along the river. They show up to the riverman's shore, and they see a dead guy there, and it's Buzz, but, like, they're like, he looks like he's been dead a hot minute. Like, probably Edmund didn't do this, but Edmund's clearly around here, because there's a shack up on this cliff, and there's smoke coming out of it, so we have to check it out. So, Gary and Keith start arguing, because Gary's like, fuck this, I'm leaving. Like, this is clearly some other dimension, the sky is red, the river is red, there's flesh in the river, I'm leaving. Like, fuck this. And Keith is just like, you're a coward, and this and that, and blah, 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 blah. And so finally, like, Keith pulls his gun on him, and Gary, like, goes to grab his own gun, and when he does, Keith shoots him, and Keith blames it on him. And it's so cool, because, like, we get this part from Gary's perspective, and Gary's like, I can see how he makes everyone else fault. Like, he's doing that now. He's like, I wasn't even going to shoot you. I was just going to hold you hostage, basically, because I was afraid you were going to take the boat, and now you're going to have to die here, and blah, 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 and this is all your fault, Gary. And so, he drags Gary into the woods a little bit, because he's like, he realizes, like, so this is not Edmund's MO, so I can't cover this up like Edmund did it. And eventually, after I bust Edmund, there's going to be cops that try to come out here. So if they find Gary, I'm fucked. So he decides to drag Gary further into the woods. He pulls off one of Gary's shoes and starts digging a shallow grave for Gary. He puts Gary in it. He starts burying Gary. And then Gary kind of lets out a noise. And he realizes, like, oh, Gary's still alive. And he's just like, yeah, fuck you, Gary. And just starts burying him alive. Horrible end for poor Gary, who was a good guy, like, genuinely. So after Keith shoots Gary, though, he's looking around for June. June's gone. And before, like, in the middle of the argument, right before they tried to pull their guns, they realized June was gone. So June had slipped away, because she's like, I gotta find Edmund before these guys do, because they're just, like, then they're gonna, like, try and capture Edmund, and I can't have that. So I gotta find him first and warn him. So that's where she goes off to. At this point, Edmund has talked to the Riverman, and the Riverman is like, there's more souls on this river, and they're looking for you, so you have to take care of this. So he slips out of the shack, June slips in, she has a conversation with the Riverman, and the Riverman is like, the person you seek is here, and da-da-da, and so she's like, cool, she leaves to go find Edmund. Gary is buried, Keith gets up to go find Edmund as well, and he does. So he puts a gun to Edmund's head. Edmund was also searching for him. He puts a gun to Edmund's head, and then out of nowhere, June hits Keith over the head. And so Edmund had been, like, beat by Keith a little bit. He's on the ground. He gets up, and he looks at June, and, like, he, like, June is so excited. Like, she immediately is like, yes, this is the right choice, blah, 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 internally. And Edmund, like, tucks some hair behind her ear, and he's like, no, I know you, darling. And she's like, well, no, but I know you, and I've been looking for you. And he's like, why have you been looking for me? And she's like, because every girl wants her dad. And so they kind of, like, embrace, and they have a sweet moment for 4.2 seconds, probably less than that, probably like 0.4 seconds, because you realize he's a serial killer, and she's also a serial killer, and that's where this is gonna end up. So you're like, it would be really touching if this wasn't, like, deeply fucked up and gonna continue to be deeply fucked up. Because, of course, they take Keith, she shoots him in the leg, in the kneecap, and explodes his kneecap. They drag him into the Riverman shack, and they go to, like, the Riverman's, like, kind of, he's got, like, this alternate realm where he kind of makes deals with people, and that's where they end up. And so Keith is trying to, like, he knows, like, the baseline of what the Riverman is, so he knows you can make deals with him. So he starts begging, like, you know, hey, make a deal with me, blah, 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 like, just get me out of here. And the Riverman's like, that's kind of not how this works. And so, like, he explains a little bit more, like, what he wants. Like, he's like, you know, the suffering that you've caused the little ones has been delicious, but, like, this is, you know, kind of the end. And he's like, no, please, no. He's like, I'll cause even more sufferings to even more little girls. I'll start trafficking them myself, and I'll put them in dog crates and starve them to death and just rape them and rape them and rape them. Please, just, you know, get me out of here. And the Riverman's like, you don't understand what it is to be a living sacrifice, unlike Edmund and June now. And so June, he looks at Edmund and he's like, you're not going to kill me. You're not going to torture me to death. Like, that's not your thing, dude. And Edmund's like, no, it's not mine, but she'll do it. It's her thing. And so she literally, like, shoots him in all of his extremities, like, painfully slowly kills him, basically. And then she has sex with her dad because, like, if you're reading Edmund's chapters, it just makes sense that that's what they would do from this point. And the end of the book it ends with him writing one of these either imaginary letters or literal letters, I can't really tell which, to Laurie from the first book. And he's basically like, you know, I understand why the Riverman said that my work's not done yet. Like, I'm going to teach her everything I know, and she and I are going to go and just fill this world full of screams and blood, and you know, every time I have sex with her, I'll think of you, Laurie, because that's the least I could do, because none of this would be happening without you. And you're just like, okay. And that's kind of how the book ends. So, like, the ending is not so, like, it's, like, it is a little open-ended. Like, we could get a third book in this series. I don't think we will, but if we did, I would read it, because, like, if you like things that are deeply fucked up, this is a story for you. I don't know what draws me to it, other than, like, serial killers always interest me, horror itself interests me, I like things that are deeply fucked up, and this book is, like, it goes there. Like, you're like, but then it goes there, and you're like, oh, wow, okay. And it does leave a lot to the imagination, so it's not like it's getting descriptive, but you're like, oh, would Edmund have? Yeah, he would do that. Like, so, just very, like, just a very cool story, question mark? I mean, it's not really cool to, like, rape people and kill them, but, like, it is such an interesting story. And I definitely think, like, Kristopher Triana has a lot of, like, he's really good at, like, he has, like, a lot of insight into serial killer habits. So, like, obviously he's watched a lot of true crime, he's probably done a lot of research, so it tracks, like, the stuff that Edmund does, and then, like, Edmund explains a lot of his childhood in his chapters, so it kind of makes sense, like, the stuff he does. Like, I didn't even go over, like, his mom dies from, like, a flesh-eating bacteria. You're like, that makes a lot of sense. The first book, it goes over, his Uncle Zeke was in Vietnam, and tortured and raped a lot of people because he was fucked up in the head, and took pictures and showed them to Edmund as a kid, so, like, it makes sense why Edmund is the way he is, and so he kind of makes a deal with the Riverman to, like, continue carrying on this bloodshed, because it's both in his best interest and the Riverman's best interest, and so, that, like, he's like, I've did this so I could fill my contract with you, because I want more power. And the Riverman's like, your power and mine are different. Never get them twisted. You do all this on your own power anyway. And so, yeah, just very strange and different. And just, like, I would love to see, like, a movie about these books. I don't know how popular they would be, but then again, there's, like, Terrifier, and that's deeply fucked up, and people love that. So, I don't really know. I would love to see the Riverman, like, artwork of him, or, like, because, like, the way he's described in the books is fucking insane, so I would love to see him, like, put together practically, physically, in some form or another, but yeah, that's, gone to see the Riverman, well, along the River of Flesh, for you. Hopefully you read it, hopefully you intend to read it. If not, like, if some of the stuff is too much for you, I totally understand that as well. Everybody has their own threshold, and sometimes those lines change and move. Personally, I have PTSD, so, like, some of the things that used to trigger me don't bother me so much anymore, and I think part of it is exposure, but I think part of it is, and by exposure, I mean 2 horror movies, and then part of it is just therapy. Doing a lot of therapy, which some people will like, oh, you really enjoyed this book, that's fucked up, you need more therapy. I always need more therapy, but I mostly enjoy horror because it just resonates with me. Like, life isn't all rainbows and butterflies, and there are people like Keith in existence, so it feels more of an affirmation of the stuff I've been through than anything else. My dad, I was talking to him about the ending of Scream 6 and how she just goes ham on that guy and just cuts him so badly, like, just stabs the fuck out of him. And my dad was like, I wish you would watch something more uplifting. And I was like, I mean, I think a woman overcoming the people who are systematically trying to kill her friends and her is a pretty uplifting story, but that's just kind of me. So, something like this particularly is more like what you make of it. Yeah. So, anyway, hopefully you enjoyed this review at the very least, even if you don't intend to read the book because you're like, that's too much for me. I don't think I can handle that. And hopefully you check out some of Triana's other stuff, because not everything is so, like, psychosexual like this is. Prettiest Girl in the Grave, that's totally fine to read if you're not interested in the psychosexual, but you enjoy his style of writing, and if you enjoy just good story. And Prettiest Girl in the Grave, I think, does have more to say as far as, like, messaging goes than this book does. This book, I think, doesn't really have much of a message. It's more just like, oh, fucked up serial killers, haha. So, anyway, for those of you who are still here, thank you very much. I know time is the one thing you never get back, so for you to spend any amount of your time with me, it is very much appreciated. I feel deeply honored. If you would like to spend more time on me, I have a Rumble channel and I have a YouTube channel. I'm not sure where you're listening. It's Beware the Moon Podcast on both of those. I also have a Substack, which is Beware the Moon Podcast. I also have a Locals, which I will link in the description. I'll link out all that other stuff too, of course. But if you subscribe to my Locals, I do have a short story up. So if you want a horror short story, there's that. And I intend to post at least one a month over on my Locals, and then I'll probably post a little bit over on my Substack as well. But thank you very much. Like I said, any amount of your time is precious, and I'm very honored that you spend it on me. And if you would like for me to review anything specific, let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed this review, if you want more reviews, go ahead and follow, subscribe, whatever. It's greatly appreciated. Leave a comment, leave a like. All those things help boost just my ability to do this, essentially, because these do take time, especially with a book review. It takes a little bit more time, so and time is money, unfortunately. So subscribing, liking, all those things, sharing with friends, having them listen, all those things kind of help me make this more of a routine thing rather than a one-off or a once-in-a-while thing. So if I ever got to a place where I could do this full-time, then like that would make these reviews happen more frequently. But anyway, thank you very much. Greatly appreciate you. You can find me on Twitter at BewareMoon. I check that usually every few days unless I'm out doing something like on vacation. So thank you very much, and I hope you guys are having a good one. Hope you're having wonderful holidays, wonderful days. Don't forget to go outside and enjoy the sun. It's good for your health. Go and put your feet in the grass, in the dirt. That's also good for your health. Just take care of yourself. And I'll see you next time.